English Heritage is a registered charity that looks after the National Heritage Collection. This comprises over 400 of England's historic buildings, monuments and sites spanning more than 5,000 years of history. Within its portfolio are Stonehenge, Dover Castle, Tintagel Castle and the best preserved parts of Hadrian's Wall. English Heritage also manages the London Blue Plaques scheme, which links influential historical figures to particular buildings. When originally formed in 1983, English Heritage was the operating name of an executive non-departmental public body of the British government, officially titled the Historic Buildings and Monuments Commission for England, that ran the national system of heritage protection and managed a range of historic properties. It was created to combine the roles of existing bodies that had emerged from a long period of state involvement in heritage protection. In 1999 the organisation merged with the Royal Commission on the Historical Monuments of England and the National Monuments Record, bringing together resources for the identification and survey of England's historic environment. On April 1, 2015, English Heritage was divided into two parts: Historic England, which inherited the statutory and protection functions of the old organisation, and the New English Heritage Trust, a charity that would operate the historic properties, and which took on the English Heritage operating name and logo. The British government gave the new charity an £80 million grant to help establish it as an independent trust, although the historic properties remained in the ownership of the state. History = non-departmental public body = over the centuries, what is now called heritage has been the responsibility of a series of state departments. There was the King's Works after the Norman Conquest, the Office of Works, the Office of Woods, Forests, Land Revenues and Works, and the Ministry of Works. Responsibility subsequently transferred to the Ministry of Public Building and Works, then to the Department of the Environment and now the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. The state's legal responsibility for the historic environment goes back to the Ancient Monuments Protection Act 1882. Central government subsequently developed several systems of heritage protection for different types of assets, introducing listing for buildings after WW2 and conservation areas in the 1960s. In 1983, Secretary of State for the Environment Michael Heseltine gave national responsibility for the historic environment to a semi-Euro autonomous agency to operate under ministerial guidelines and to government policy. The Historic Buildings and Monuments Commission was formed under the terms of the National Heritage Act 1983 on April 1, 1984. The 1983 Act also dissolved the bodies that had previously provided independent advice, the Ancient Monuments Board for England and the Historic Buildings Council for England, and incorporated these functions in the new body. Soon after, the Commission gained the operating name of English Heritage by its first chairman, Lord Montague of Beaulieu. A National Register of Historic Parks and Gardens was set up in 1984, and a Register for Historic Battlefields was created in March 1995. Registration is a material consideration in the planning process. In April 1999, English Heritage merged with the Royal Commission on the Historical Monuments of England and the National Monuments Record, bringing together resources for the identification and survey of England's historic environment. By adoption, this included responsibility for the National Record of Archaeological Sites from the Ordnance Survey, the National Library of Aerial Photographs, and 2 million RAF and Ordnance Survey aerial photographs. These, together with other nationally important external acquisitions, meant that English Heritage was one of the largest publicly accessible archives in the UK. 2.53 million records are available online, including more than 426,000 images. In 2010 and 2011 it recorded 4.3 million unique online user sessions and over 110,000 people visited NMR exhibitions held around the country in 2009 October. In 2012 the section responsible for archive collections was renamed the English Heritage Archive. As a result of the National Heritage Act 2002, English Heritage acquired administrative responsibility for historic wrecks and submerged landscapes within 12 miles of the English coast. The administration of the listed building system was transferred from DCMS to English Heritage in 2006. However, Actual listing decisions still remain the responsibility of the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, who is required by the Planning Act 1990 to approve a list of buildings of special architectural or historic interest. Following the public body's reform in 2010, English heritage was confirmed as the government's statutory advisor on the historic environment, and the largest source of non-lottery grant funding for heritage assets. It was retained on grounds of performing a technical function which should remain independent from government. However, the department also suffered from budget cuts during the recession of the 2010s, resulting in a repairs deficit of £100 million. Charitable trust equals. In June 2013, the British government announced plans to provide an £80 million grant to enable English heritage to become a self-financing charity. The national portfolio of historic properties remain in public ownership, but the new English heritage will be licensed to manage them. The change occurred on April 1, 2015, with the statutory planning and heritage protection functions remaining an independent, non-departmental public body, rebranded as Historic England. The care of the properties in the National Collection and the visitor experience attached to them were transferred to the new English Heritage Trust, although the English Heritage name and logo remains. The new trust has a license to operate the properties until 2023. National Collection. English heritage is the guardian of over 400 sites and monuments, the most famous of which include Stonehenge, Iron Bridge and Dover Castle. Whilst many have an entry charge, more than 250 properties are free to enter, including Maiden Castle, Dorset and St Catherine's Oratory. The sites are part of the portfolio of over 880 historical places across the UK amassed by the British government between the 1880s and the 1970s to form the National Collection of Built and Archaeological Heritage. These sites represent a deliberate attempt by the state in the 19th and early 20th century to take the nation's most significant prehistoric sites and medieval sites, which were no longer in active use, into public ownership. This national property collection performs the same function as pictures in the National Gallery and the archaeological material in the British Museum. Unlike the National Trust, English heritage holds few furnished properties. New sites are rarely added to the collection, as other charities and institutions are now encouraged to care for them and open them to the public. One recent acquisition, in late 2011, was the Harmondsworth Barn in West London, close to Heathrow Airport. The properties are held by English Heritage under various arrangements. The majority are in the guardianship of the Secretary of State for the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, with the freehold being retained by the owner. The remaining properties are either owned by English Heritage, other government departments or the Crown Estate. Indiana, 2013-14. There were 5.73 million visits to staffed sites, with 713,000 free educational visits to sites, collections and tailored learning activities and resources. Funding. As a charitable trust, English Heritage relies on the income generated from admission fees to their properties, membership and other tradable incomes such as catering, holiday cottages and merchandise. Furthermore, they undertake fundraising campaigns and make use of grants. To ease the transition, the government has supplied £80 million until 2023 to cover a funding deficit, specifically to tackle the backlog of maintenance to the sites in English Heritage's care. Previously, when English Heritage was a non-departmental public body and included the functions of planning, listing, awarding grants, heritage research and advice, most of its funding derived from a government funding. In 2013 and €2014, English Heritage had a total income of £186.55 million, of which £99.85 million came from government through grant in aid, with the remaining £86.7 million coming from earned sources. This included £17.47 million from property admissions, £14.96 million from catering and retail, £22.91 million from membership and £26.39 million from donations and grants. Membership. Members of the public are actively encouraged to join English Heritage as a member. Membership provides benefits such as free admission to its properties and member-only events, as well as reduced admission to associated properties. Members also get access for free or reduced cost to properties managed by CADW in Wales, Historic Scotland, the Office of Public Works in the Republic of Ireland, Manx National Heritage on the Isle of Man and Heritage New Zealand. Indiana, 2013/14. There were 1.32 million members. However, membership does not convey voting rights or influence over the way English Heritage is run. Participation in consultations and web-based surveys facilitated by English Heritage is not restricted to its membership. It invites various groups and members of the public to give views on specific issues, most notably in recent years, about the Stonehenge Road Tunnel project proposals. Volunteering, the organization welcomes volunteers. Roles range from room stewarding, running education workshops and gardening, to curatorial cleaning and research. Indiana, 2013/14. The number of regular volunteers reached 1,473. Management and governance. English Heritage is governed by a trustee board who set the strategic direction of the organization and ensure that the organization delivers its goals and objectives. It is led by the chairman, currently Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence. Other trustees are Alex Balfour, Vicky Barnsley OBE, Suki Hemming, Ronald Hutton, Kate James Weed, Sir Laurie Magnus, Ian McCaig, Malcolm Redding, Sarah Staniforth, James Twining and Charles Gurasa. Operational management and delegated to the Chief Executive, Kate Mather, who will begin on May 5, 2015 from the National Trust for Scotland. The Chief Executive is supported by an executive board of 8 directors. Indiana, 2013/14. Prior to becoming a charity, English Heritage employed 2,578 staff. Blue Plaque. English Heritage has since 1986 administered the Blue Plaque scheme in London. These recognise places important to people of significance in the capital and remain the responsibility of English Heritage following the transfer to the voluntary sector in 2015. Controversies. English Heritage sites in Cornwall. In 1999 a pressure group, the revived Cornish Stanary Parliament, wrote to English Heritage asking them to remove all signs bearing their name from Cornish sites by July 1999 as they regarded the ancient sites as Cornish heritage, not English. Over a period of 11 months members of the Cornish Stanary removed 18 signs and a letter was sent to English Heritage saying the signs have been confiscated and held as evidence of English cultural aggression in Cornwall. Such racially motivated signs are deeply offensive and cause distress to many Cornish people. On January 18, 2002, at Dora Crown Court, after the prosecution successfully applied for a public immunity certificate to suppress defence evidence, 3 members of the group agreed to return the signs and pay £4,500 in compensation to English Heritage and to be bound over to keep the peace. In return, the prosecution dropped charges of conspiracy to cause criminal damage. In 2011 Conservative MP George Eustace stated that Cornish heritage is not English, and that there is a growing feeling that Cornwall should have its own heritage organisation, taking over from English Heritage. He suggests that English Heritage be replaced with a Cornish Heritage Group, just like they have for instance in Wales and Scotland. The then Culture Secretary Jeremy Hunt was called upon to give cash to a new autonomous body in Cornwall by top-slicing English Heritage's budget. Fortress House. In 2006, the Secretary of State at the DCMS issued a certificate of exemption from listing for Fortress House, the then English Heritage headquarters. In 2009, it was demolished and the site redeveloped for a commercial office building. Photography. In 2010 the organization sent an email to open-access photograph agency Photolibra, attempting to ban the unauthorized commercial use of photographs of Stonehenge. A subsequent statement of regret was issued, clarifying that we do not control the copyright of all images of Stonehenge and have never tried to do so. The organization added that they request that commercial photographers pay fees and abide by certain conditions. See also, List of monastic houses in England, castles in Great Britain and Ireland, Festival of History, Historic Chapels Trust, Battle of the Beanfield, List of English heritage properties in Somerset. Similar organisations CADW, Historic Scotland. Manx National Heritage, National Trust for Places of Historic Interest or Natural Beauty. References. Further reading Thurley, Simon. Men from the Ministry, How Britain Saved Its Heritage. New Haven and London, Yale University Press. ISBN 978-0-300-19572-9. External links, English Heritage website.